Hey there, brother friends and sister friends. Welcome back to our series on internal family systems, or IFS. In this series, I'm simply offering you a lens, a way of understanding yourself that also can help deepen your connection with God, a way to notice what's happening inside of you without fear or shame or self-rejection. In the last two episodes, we talked about a brief overview of IFS and the different parts of ourselves. We talked about our core self, the part of us that was created in Eden, the truest, most grounded version of who we are. We talked about our exiled parts, the parts that hold our deepest pain, wounds, and unmet needs. Many of these wounds exist simply because we were made for Eden, but raised outside of it. And then we talked about our protector parts, the parts that work tirelessly to keep those core wounds from being triggered again and again in a fallen world. In the last episode, I also shared a personal example to help bring those ideas into clearer focus. Today, we're going to be talking about more specifically our protector parts, what they are, why they exist, and how we can begin engaging them with curiosity instead of fear or frustration. You see, the ultimate goal of IFS is not to get rid of parts. It's to learn how to live from our core self, that part of us created in Eden. There are 8 helpful words that the creator of IFS uses, often called the 8 C's, that help us identify when we're operating from our core self. Calm, curiosity, compassion, clarity, confidence, courage, creativity, and connectedness. This is the part of us that is not ruled by fear, the part that is not crippled by grief or pain, the part that can stay grounded, open, and present, even in hard moments. I think we can all agree this is where we want to live from a more rooted, centered, vulnerable, and connected place. And yet, many of us look at our parts, and remember, parts is simply another word for patterns of thinking, feeling, or behaving. We look at our parts and we assume that those parts are the very things keeping us from living in the way that we want to. We assume that our parts are the problem, but that's often not true. In fact, we often deeply misunderstand our protector parts. At first glance, they can look like bad parts, the ones sabotaging us, getting in the way, or keeping us stuck. But when we slow down and stop and really listen, we often discover something surprising. These are not bad parts at all. They're actually very good parts, trying to help us get to a good place, but doing so in a limited or misguided way. And this is where IFS really begins. Almost all IFS work starts with protector parts, getting to know them, understanding them, and slowly building trust with them so that deeper healing can happen. But often, when we begin engaging one protector part, another one shows up. For example, you might notice an inner accuser, a part that criticizes or pushes or demands perfection from you. Often, this part is trying to help by preventing rejection or judgment or ridicule from others. But as you start noticing this part, you might suddenly think, I hate this part. It's stolen so much from my life. I wish it would just go away. And here's something important to know. If you notice yourself experiencing anything outside of those 8 C's, calm, curious, compassion, clarity, confidence, courage, creativity, or connectedness, that's usually a sign that another part has just entered the room. So if you feel anger or frustration or shame or helplessness toward a part, that reaction makes a lot of sense. It's just not your core self. It's very often another protector part stepping in, also trying to do something good for you, like helping you live free from an internal shame monologue, which is a good thing. We want that too. But that angry protector part has just as much good and just as much limited understanding as that inner accuser part. So instead of letting one or the other protector part win out, we instead want to get to know both of them, appreciate where they're both coming from, the good that they both want for you. And then once rapport and trust is established, we want to ask them to trust you and God, to be the protectors of them, not the other way around. I often invite clients to imagine that they are the CEO of their internal enterprise. They're seated at a boardroom table, and each chair is occupied by a different part. And so this allows them to listen to their internal advisors without being overtaken or ruled by them. Because the final decision always rests with their core self, the part of them untouched by distortion or pain. You see, many of us grew up believing that these protector parts are in charge, that they know best. But once we really get to know them, we often discover something very tender. Many protector parts are actually very young. I can't tell you how many times clients' parts have shrunk as we've gotten to know them with genuine curiosity. I once worked with a client who initially described a protector part as ominous and big and all-knowing, like a figure surveying her internal world and passing judgment on everything she saw. But as we slowly engaged that part with curiosity instead of fear or resistance, it revealed itself as actually a 7-year-old little girl, projecting an intimidating presence in an effort to stay safe. And so taking our parts at face value and letting them rule would be like letting my 7-year-old run our household. My 7-year-old, he's good. He means well. He genuinely wants to protect everyone. But he's simply not equipped for that responsibility, not because he's bad, but because he's just too young to carry that weight. And so in the same way, our protector parts often took on responsibilities in childhood that they were never meant to carry. Things like protecting our hearts, our wounds, our sense of belonging, our worth, our identity. There's something deeply noble and beautiful about that, but they're just not equipped to do it long term. So while we meet these parts with compassion and gratitude, there also comes a time when we gently help them lay that burden down, not by force, not by logic, definitely not by bulldozing them. Because healing happens through relationship, not reasoning. So we always begin with curiosity. We get to know our protector parts by asking questions like, what does this part of me look like? What is it afraid of? What is it trying to protect me from? What does it want for me? Here are a few protector parts that I see often, both in my own life and in therapy with other clients. I often see mask parts, parts that hide true thoughts or emotions in order to meet others' expectations. Some people see these parts as literal masks. Others see them as grayed out versions of themselves. And some people I've seen experience these parts as walls, keeping their true self hidden and protected. I also see self-accuser parts, parts that criticize, push, or demand perfection. They often appear competent, put together, and in control. But internally, they diminish accomplishments. They shame desires, or they drive relentless striving in an effort to avoid pain or failure. And then I often see barrier protector parts. Sometimes protectors show up as walls or police tape or glass ceilings or locked doors. These parts are often protecting memories or emotions that our nervous systems fear that we won't survive if they're accessed. And so at first, these parts can feel confusing or even cruel. But when we stop, look, and listen, we almost always discover that they're trying to do something good for us. I once had a client who described a protector part as her little devil, and she experienced it as racing up and down her arm. She felt annoyed by it and wished she could just flick it away and be done with it. And so I shared a familiar scene from my own home. Picture me in the evening, cooking dinner, helping with homework, answering a phone call, and my 7-year-old calls out, "Mom, come look at this." If I don't respond, he keeps calling. And the longer that I ignore him, the louder and more urgent he becomes until eventually I feel overwhelmed and snap at him. Often, this is exactly what's happening internally with our protector parts. They're trying to alert us to something that they perceive as dangerous, but because of their developmental limitations, they don't know how to communicate it well. And so when they don't receive attention, reassurance, or guidance, they escalate until we experience them as a threat far bigger than they actually are. So I invited this client to do something different, to pause, to get curious, to put the spatula down proverbially, so to speak, and get on this part's level. And when she did, this part shifted. It no longer felt like a little devil racing through her body. It became, her words, a little protector friend, kind of like a tiny lapdog, alert, vigilant, and seeking reassurance from her. And so that shift changed everything. Now, instead of ignoring this part or being annoyed by it or allowing it to run the show, my client was now able to gently pat this little part on the head and say, "Thank you, little friend, for alerting me to something you think might be a threat. But we're actually okay. This isn't a big deal. We can handle this. We're safe." And almost immediately, that part would calm down. Now, I'm going to skip ahead for a moment and tell you what I usually discover when working with protector parts. If I had to boil it down, after working with hundreds, if not thousands of protector parts with clients, nearly every one of these protector parts usually wants the same thing: to be loved, to be protected, to belong, to be valued. And here's the theological tension. We were created for Eden, but none of us were raised there. It's a bit like being created for Earth, but growing up on Mars. You might survive, you might adapt, but your body was never designed for that atmosphere. And in the same way, our parts adapted to a fallen world the best way that they knew how, not because they were broken, but because survival required it. And adaptation always comes at a cost. But when we allow God to steward our inner world with us, we can show our parts a new way, a better way, one where love and belonging and worth are no longer earned or fought for, but simply received. So we've covered a lot today, especially around protector parts, how they form, and a new way of seeing and relating to them with curiosity rather than fear or frustration. In our next episode, we'll talk about how to connect with and validate our protector parts, learning to truly see them and gently partner with them so that we can move toward the exiled parts they're working so hard to protect. Thanks for joining me today. And until next time, let's keep our hearts set on things above, even in a world so far from Eden.